Hello and welcome. We are with Mr. T.C. Ranganathan, the CMD of Exim Bank. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let me first start by asking you about the impact of the recent depreciation in the rupee on exports and on smaller businesses.
See, the depreciation of the rupee which has happened is of recent time. It takes some time for that effect to get percolated down into the system. There is a one-time impact which some companies benefit in, that a transaction which is priced at a particular dollar rate, so a certain rupee rate comes in, if they have not taken forward covers and forward bookings. But the effect of a depreciation or a change in the rupee dollar parity comes about in a medium to long term. The impact of this changeover, which earlier, if you recollect, in about till October 2012, the rupee dollar parity used to be around 44, 45. Now it seems to be around 60, 60, 58, 65, 62, hovering on to 60. If you take 60 as a benchmark and 45 as a benchmark, it is a change of 15 on a 45, that is 33% changeover. This will imply there will be an enhanced competitiveness of the Indian productive sector vis-a-vis the US dollar. Particular industries or particular companies may benefit or may not benefit depending on their ability to bargain future prices. But in the medium to long term, production in India would become competitive compared to what it was in October 2012. It creates a groundswell, an opportunity for fresh investments to take place of this parity change, and that would actually should happen, and that is what would result in a further increase in exports. A particular company with a pre-existing capacity is already exporting an X amount. It can export only an incremental X amount on that. If new capacities are created, only then does a fresh capacity get impacted. So your question is whether it will impact exports? Yes. In the short term, smaller amount. In the medium to long term, significantly larger amount.
Now let me put this with context to industrial clusters, because if you're saying that there will be some amount of capacity building that we will see happening, perhaps it's also the right time to give that extra additional push that is required for industrial clusters. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. First of all, concept of cluster. The way the economic dynamics has been changing in the last 30 to 40 years, and Exim Bank has been studying how various economies manage their growth patterns. We find that most economies and most countries across the world have managed their industrial growth through clustering. India has also done it to some extent. It needs to do more of it. The more of it is less on the governmental account, more on the individual company accounts. Clustering is not only simplistic location and co-location, but also forms of mutual cooperation. I would like to give this example of how clusters in other parts of the world operate. If you want to buy a particular item, whether it is oil rigs or whether it is cigarette lighters or whether it is silk ties, you think of a destination point from where you can buy. Then people go there and buy. And for that to go and buy, the cluster must have a pull factor. In India, we have experienced that in consumer goods, and I had given an example, or I would like to give an example of a common textile, this thing like sarees. 50% of the audience would hopefully be women, and if you are women, then a concept of a Kanjivaram saree would be known to everyone, or a Pochampally saree, or a Maheshwari saree. What distinguished these clusters was that all of them had a self-imposed minimum quality standard which was of a high order. They all stuck to that. They all had a common USP. None of the firms within that had the same pattern. They were all innovating on patterns and designs and competing with each other. but adhering to a minimum internally pre-satisfied and pre-qualified standard of excellence, which is a very high standard, so that other units from outside the cluster could not easily compete with them. Very few of Indian clusters have got that same ethos. Government of India and the state governments have been investing a lot in the hard clustering, and we've got a lot of these clusters which have come up, whether it is in textiles, whether it is in auto components, whether it is in chemicals, and a number of units are there, and they are all doing well. I'm not saying they're not doing well. The growth story of Indian exports has also been good. It's not denied. And the 20% CAGR for the last 10-12 years is a strong story. But they're not doing as well as their potential can be. Each of them, if you see, are competing and they're trying to do marketing themselves. So their cost economies are completely different from what the cost economies of a normal cluster firm is. If you go to China, their costing does not involve a huge amount of overhead costs in form of marketing and selling expenses, because people come there to buy. In India, most of the cluster companies go out to sell. That is not the cluster dynamics. Clustering is not only co-location, but also softer forms of cooperation, which attracts people to come there and buy, therefore saving on your selling costs and your overhead costs of marketing. And this dynamic has not started taking place in India. The clustering also takes place in common procurement. Kanjivaram silk sari had that silk quality, which was everyone who could touch it would distinguish between a Kanjivaram silk and a non-Kanjivaram silk, because they were procuring a certain similar silk together. It applies equally to industrial goods. When a person goes to Norway to buy oil rigs, he doesn't pick on a particular firm. He says, I'll go there and I'll pick up oil rig from there. Because there are 8 or 10 or 12 shipyards which make the same things. This is a thing which we must learn to practice in India, and firms must learn to cooperate with each other.
Apart from marketing, skill development is also considered is considered a weak area as far as Indian clusters are concerned.
No, I would disagree to that to some extent. Skill development has been taking place, because the moment you have co-location of several units of a same type in a certain area, skill formation takes place. And Indian product quality in terms of labor skills is not of what the international levels are. What is off is adherence to a pre-specified minimum quality standard, pre-imposed, that is self-imposed standards of quality, self-imposed standards of environmental management, self-imposed size of scale. And that scale, this imposed scale is that if there are 20 companies, they would want 25 or 40 companies to come up there. They don't want to dominate the cluster. They prefer that the cluster dominates others. In today's world, the competition is not going to be between two companies, one in China and one in India. It will be between two clusters. One in China, one in India, or one in China and one in Norway, or one in China, one in France, one in India, one in USA. Clusters will say, because the costing happens not only through a product costing of a single company, but the cost of logistics, the cost of shipments, cost of procurement, cost of sales. And these costs account for about 20% of a normal balance sheet of profit. You see the profit and loss account. Manufacturing costs normally of all the overheads which go into a manufacturing will cost about 50 to 60%, 65%.
Now, what about access to finance? Because
access to finance, interest cost, if you see a balance sheet, the profit, this thing, and we have done this thing of study of 2,700 companies and the CMI, Reserve Bank had done a similar study. The average cost of finance to the total profit and loss account ranges from 3 to 6%. So the impact you can do is only on the 3 to 6%. 10 to 11% is the cost of marketing and sales.
no, I'm not talking about the cost of finance, but the availability of finance.
So when you see the cost of finance is the first item in availability. If availability is restricted, the cost of finance goes up very high.
Okay.
The fact that in India it is 3 to 7, that means availability of finance is not an issue compared to other. And again, even if in an economy there is a, what you call a difficulty of access to finance, companies in a cluster having a common trend path would face an easier access to finance, because they would all be doing an activity. The activity level would be higher than being outside the cluster. There would be efficiencies of being co-located in the cluster. Banks would be more willing to lend in that cluster. But if a cluster is not doing well, it will be more difficult to access finance. If there is a sick industrial cluster and you have one company which is doing well, people will look at it with suspicion that it too shall follow the path of others. If it is a cluster where 10 companies are doing outstandingly well, then you will think the 11th company also will do equally well, or if not, because they are follow the path. So the banker's attitude to finance will also depend on the cluster health, and that is what requires a thought process, which is a reorientation of the entrepreneurial mind, that is to take care of the interest of your neighbor instead of pulling down your neighbor, which is what often happens in India. And you reflect on what has been the impact. The amount of investment governments, whether state or national, have made in setting up clusters has been enormous. But in the last 5 to 7 years, in item out of item, which is, I would start off by what are the Indian strength areas. Textile is an Indian strength area. About 8% of world exports takes place from India. But in apparels, today Bangladesh, 2 clusters in Bangladesh, in Chittagong and Dhaka, export 4 times or 3.5 to 4 times more than the total apparels exported by all of India. And all of India includes from Punjab down to Tirupur and Coimbatore, this thing, and Chennai and Bangalore and everything. And that has happened in the last 7 years. It has happened not because the government of Bangladesh was more efficient than the governments of Punjab and Haryana and Delhi and Karnataka and what have you, but because those entrepreneurs there collaborate far more than what the Indian colors. Similarly, leather. India is, again, I'm giving very simplistic examples. India has the second largest source of leather, and the amount of what you call low value leather which we export is among the largest in the world. But Vietnam, which is a small country which does not have great amount of own leather, exports more leather goods than India does, because they go into higher end thing. And it's not that Vietnam is a very great country or very great amount of this there, but because those entrepreneurs there collaborate with each other, they are able to share orders, they are able to share expertise, they support each other. So the leather cluster in Vietnam has overtaken the clusters of Kanpur, Agra and Ambattur and others combined. The same thing has happened in all other forms. We have a very good chemical industry, and chemistry is a USP in the Indian universities. For a very long length of time, Indian chemical listing has been of good order. Pharma, we are supposed to be a leaders in the world. They all become chemistry. But even in the field of chemical based and chemistry thing, if you see the countries which are doing better than us, Switzerland is a small geographical country. A Switzerland cluster, there is only 2 clusters there. They export far more chemicals in terms of absolute value than India does. It's a geography which is much smaller than us. Switzerland is number 1 on the environmental index. India is 122nd in the environmental index. Per square foot of land, they export 1.5 times to 2 times or maybe 5 times because if you see the value, the aggregate export is 1.5 times ours. Their aggregate land area is, I think, 1/20th of ours or 1/30th of ours or what. So you see that impact which is there.
No, but a lot of people say that one problem with industrial clusters is that they are not that oriented towards exports and perhaps not as competitive in the global markets. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I have been in China for 2 years. No cluster is oriented towards exports or domestic sales. A cluster has to be oriented to manufacturing goods of a pre-designed and a pre-approved voluntary quality level which is higher than that of the competing sectors. So long as the cluster attains to that, then it doesn't have to go out and export. People come to buy. People will come to buy from a local place, people will come to buy from outside. a Kanjipuram silk sari, no one goes, they don't go and sell that they're going to sell so much in Delhi. Delhi people go and buy Kanjipuram, how much they and they're going to sell it there. They repeat it for product after product. Clustering means that you have to cooperate in setting yourself standards of excellence and adhering to it by common action. And once you have adhered to that, people will come to that place to buy. The Indian entrepreneurs, on the other hand, think that their thing is to manufacture and then go out for markets and look for exports, and therefore end up being cost incompetitive compared to companies in clusters outside.
So finally, will rating clusters help sort out some of these problems in some way?
It will, because once knowledge and awareness goes about, and here I would like to compliment what AIN is doing of having a conference on clustering, because Indian companies will be exposed to what the global peers are doing, and they'll listen to global experiences, and then when they find that all of them are focusing more on quality standards, quality specifications, mutual cooperation, and they are not, then maybe they'll start reorienting themselves. If they reorient themselves, then with the changed value of the rupee, India can show explosive growth in exports.
Okay, so on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you.